have to admit, that didn't go nearly as well as I'd hoped. The funding was short, but tourists should never get involved with this kind of archaeological research. It was almost as bad as back in Peru. Come to think of it, there was a fountain of youth there too, as well as a powerfully vengeful deity that didn't like to be looked at. What, you didn't know about that? Oh, well, it's a long flight. I'm gonna get some rest, and I can tell you the whole story later. What? Your mother didn't teach you to be a little patient? Fine, I suppose. I'll tell you now, but where to begin?
Welcome to the fourth and final episode of The Forbidden Eye. Our expedition is nearly drawing to a close. Somehow over the past 3 weeks, I managed to talk for over 90 minutes about the Indiana Jones Adventure ride in Disneyland, California. And as much as I would love to keep going on about it, I think it's time that we move on. As I mentioned here and there over the past episodes, however, The Forbidden Eye is not the only Disney Indiana Jones-based attraction. And so today we're going to be taking a little tour around the globe to look at 5 other Disney attractions that are all very much related. After the Disneyland openings of Captain EO in 1986 and Star Tours in 1987, George Lucas agreed to continue working with Disney to develop some new attractions for Disney's upcoming park, which was Disney's Mgm Studios, which opened in May of 1989. It's now Disney's Hollywood Studios, but whatever. Our first 2 attractions for today will have us in the then Disney's MGM Studios, now Disney's Hollywood Studios at Disney World in Florida. The Great Movie Ride opened with MGM Studios in 1989, and the undisputed coolest scene of the ride was this recreation of Indiana Jones and Sala finding the Ark of the Covenant as it was seen in the first Indiana Jones movie. There was some more cool Egyptian temple Indiana Jones scenes after this, but the Great Movie Ride was shut down in 2017 to make way for Mickey and Minnie's Runaway Railway. So as a whole, Indy's presence in the Great Movie Ride is pretty inconsequential, just a little tidbit I thought I'd throw at you, but we're gonna quickly move on into our next attraction now. Along with that very same collaboration, George Lucas executive produced the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular, which debuted in MGM Studios August 25th of 1989, just a few months after the park opened. It was supposed to be an opening day thing, but this show is so complex and dangerous that the actors needed just a couple more months to prepare before the show went live. This is the only attraction on our list today that is not a ride, but instead is an epic live-action stunt show. A massive theater was built for the show that can seat over 2,000 guests for each 25-minute performance, of which there are typically several performances every single day of the week. This show is genuinely fantastic. I love this thing. It is always a treat to get to sit and watch the Indiana Jones Stunt Spectacular. It's a stunt and action show with lots of, classic Indy beating up bad guys and explosions and everything you would hope for and everything you would expect. But it does do 2 special things. First, it recreates a lot of scenes from Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first Indiana Jones movie. Seeing these iconic scenes performed in a different way, seeing them performed live is really cool. It's pretty special and incredible to see how they do it. But number 2, it's a show, but it's also not a show in some ways. Going along with the original theming and concepts of MGM Studios, the Stunt Spectacular takes guests behind the scenes in a way to show them how classic action movies were made, with real props and explosions and things in a contained setting that keeps things relatively safe for the actors. So the show is not a continuous story like some of the other shows and musicals in the Disney parks, but rather several kind of disjointed action scenes with directors and crew popping in to explain what's going on and how it's being done. It's dated in a way, but it holds up. It's really a spectacular performance. All in all, the show cost $20 million to create. That's a lot of money for a show, and it it shows. The sets are massive and impressive, yet also mobile. These colossal things here have diesel engines and can just go ahead and roll away for the next scene, and the actors are all spectacular stunt performers. It is, as I've been saying, it's a very impressive show. This show hopefully still exists. It has not yet returned since the initial closures of Disney World for COVID, but some guests have recently observed maintenance being done to the stage, so hopefully the show will return to the park fairly soon. But the show is old, so just with that in mind, it's in danger of getting removed entirely, but guests still love it. This show still fills all 2,000 seats on a very regular basis. Best case scenario, in my opinion, they re-script the show, make a lot of it new, but still similar enough to the old one where it's preserved in a way, but kept fresh so it can keep performing for generations to come. With that, we're gonna hop onto our next park, get on a plane, fly us right on over to France. If you remember back to episode 1, Indiana Jones and the Lost Expedition was the ambitious multi-ride Indiana Jones theme expansion that Imagineers Blue Sky imagineered to add to Adventureland in Disneyland, California. Of course, as we mentioned, it was never built, but Imagineers loved the idea and they tried their hardest to once again make it a reality with the creation of Euro Disney, of a brand new Disney park. A very similar land was proposed to be constructed in Euro Disney, which again is now Disneyland Paris. As we know, however, the opening of Euro Disney did not go so well. Low attendance reportedly lost Disney parks over $3 billion. $3 billion. That's enough to have built 30 Indiana Jones adventures, going off of the estimated $100 million it cost to build the one in California. So thanks, Euro Disney.
I'll never forgive you.
Okay, I forgive you, but still, that's really a bummer. So that massive Indiana Jones land expansion was promptly canceled, and opening day in Adventureland in Euro Disney was very empty. Pretty much the only thing in Adventureland at first was Pirates of the Caribbean, and it is a great version of Pirates of the Caribbean, but it was a lot less than what was originally proposed. One little tiny attraction did kind of survive the grand plans of the Lost Expedition, however. When Euro Disney opened in 1992, it was lacking a true thrill ride, and while Disney was losing a lot of money very fast, they thought that they could possibly attract a teenage audience to the park if they just threw in a roller coaster. Of course, as I just said, they were losing money fast, so the roller coaster had to be built on a very tight budget. Original concepts for the upcoming Indiana Jones Minecart roller coaster included animatronics in the queue, massive statues, an indoor temple section themed like the minecart chase in the Temple of Doom movie, an animatronic Indiana Jones, and a lot more really cool ideas that the Imagineers threw out there. But Disney executives saw those plans and said, guys, we told you we're on a budget, so just throw all of that away. What was actually built was significantly less exciting. Disney bought an off-the-shelf and out-of-date roller coaster, the Pinfari TL59, which had already existed at other amusement parks for 10 years by that point. And then to try and Disney-fy it, they built a little bit of temple theming around it. It essentially has nothing to do with Indiana Jones. It has no story, it has no animatronics, but it's got a loop-de-loop so the teens will love it, right, guys? Come on, teens, save us, please. The Indiana Jones and the Temple of Peril ride opened July 30th of 1993, and no surprises, it did virtually nothing to increase attendance to Euro Disney. The teens didn't bite. It had a loop-de-loop and everything, but the teens just didn't bite. Everyone expected more from Disney, and this ride is considerably below their usual standards. All of my disappointment about the loss of amazing things that could have been aside, this ride is fine. It was actually the very first Disney ride ever to have a loop-de-loop, to have an inversion, and it's a fine coaster. It's not exciting, but it's fine. The new Space Mountain ride in Euro Disney opened in 1995, and it did what the Temple of Peril tried to do. It brought in new visitors and essentially saved the park. The success of Space Mountain, however, resulted in even less interest in the Temple of Peril. So to try once more to bring in a new audience, to attract new people to the Temple of Peril, in the year 2000, Disney came up with this this genius idea. They flipped all the ride vehicles backwards, so guests could ride the Temple of Peril, but backwards. I personally actually genuinely really love this idea. It makes the ride more unique. It makes it feel more out of control, Indiana Jones adventure-y. However, interest in that even quickly dwindled over time, and in 2004 the ride vehicles were flipped back to going forward, and that's where we are today in 2021. That's the Temple of Peril. In summary, it exists. I personally hope it gets massively re-themed or even torn down to make way for something better, but for now, it is a coaster, and it exists. And with that, we'll catch another flight on over to Japan this time to visit what may very well be the greatest theme park on the entire planet, Tokyo Disney Sea. Tokyo's Indiana Jones Adventure, aka the Temple of the Crystal Skull, opened with Disney Sea on September 4th of 2001. And no, it has nothing to do with the fourth Indiana Jones movie. This was actually built years prior to that. It is the only other Indiana Jones adventure ride, and in some ways it is a clone of Disneyland's Temple of the Forbidden Eye, but it's also quite different. I would argue that it's also overall better than the Temple of the Forbidden Eye. A lot of it is a lot more impressive. However, parts of it, namely the backstory surrounding the ride, is notably worse. The ride has the same track as Disneyland's version, most of the same technology as Disneyland's version, and a lot of the same theming, though nothing is exactly the same. It's like they made an exact clone of the ride and then just changed everything. So let's start with the one part of the ride that is, in my opinion, notably worse than the Disneyland version of the ride, which is the story. As we learned in episode 2 of The Forbidden Eye, the story and lore surrounding Mara's Temple of the Forbidden Eye is incredibly detailed, incredibly intricate, and blends right into the backstory of the Indiana Jones films. I don't think George Lucas had nearly as much of a role, if he had any role at all, in developing the Temple of the Crystal Skull, however. The ride is set in 1934, just a year before Indiana Jones discovers the Temple of the Forbidden Eye in the Lost River Delta of India. It also might be 1933 for the Crystal Skull, or 1932. It could also be 1931 or 1930, but 1934 works just fine, so we're gonna go with that. The Temple of the Crystal Skull is also in the Lost River Delta, but not the Lost River Delta of India, where the Temple of the Forbidden Eye takes place. Instead, it's in the Lost River Delta section of Tokyo Disney Sea, which is kind of nowhere in particular. Now, I'm going to argue that Tokyo Disney Sea's Lost River Delta is set in the rainforests of Peru. Others will tell you that it's set somewhere in Central America. Others will tell you that it's an unspecified region of Mexico. But let me explain why I'm gonna settle on Peru. I say Peru because of this roller coaster here. It's called Raging Spirits. It's essentially a better version of the Indiana Jones and the Temple of Peril ride in Paris, but the theming is very definitely Incan inspired, the Incans being an ancient Peruvian empire. Furthermore, Harrison Hightower, who is a member of Disney's Society of Explorers and Adventurers, which is way too elaborate of a topic for me to really get into right now, but this guy Harrison Hightower canonically stole artifacts from the Raging Spirits Temple, which was in the Lost River Deltas of Peru. So with that in mind, I'm just gonna go ahead and say that all of the Lost River Deltas in Peru. However, just to throw a wrench in my plans, the Temple of the Crystal Skull is very clearly Mayan, and the Mayans were never as far south as Peru, their civilization extending from modern-day Mexico down to Nicaragua, and the statue standing outside of the Temple of the Crystal Skull is actually not original Disney Imagineering at all. Rather, it's a direct copy of a real Mayan statue in Copan, which is in modern-day Guatemala. So maybe this ride actually takes place in Guatemala? But holy cow, that's enough of a history lesson. To be completely honest, this ride takes place wherever the heck you want it to. Just for fun, I'm gonna say Peru. It is worth noting, though, that this version of the ride is even more detailed and immersive and amazing than our own beloved Temple of the Forbidden Eye, but a lot less of the details are imagineered from nothing, mind you. There's a lot less original concepts. Like the Copan statue, there's a lot of recreations of real things kind of just crammed into this ride, which it looks really cool, so it doesn't matter that much, but it's not as original, so it's shame on you, Tokyo Disney Sea, greatest park in the whole world. Anyways, the ride takes place in 1994 or whatever, and wherever the heck it is that Indiana Jones has discovered the Temple of the Crystal Skull. That's the first and biggest distinction from Disneyland California's version of the ride to Tokyo Disney Sea's version. While the Temple of the Forbidden Eye has a lot of inspiration drawn from ancient East Asian cultures, the Temple of the Crystal Skull shows a lot of the exact same scenes, but with ancient Central and South American cultural influences instead. In this temple, Indiana Jones is searching for the fabled Fountain of Youth. This temple notably does not have Mara. It does not have a deity who is willing to offer one of three gifts to those who don't look into his eyes. Instead, this temple has a crystal skull who gets mad sometimes, and also there's a Fountain of Youth in there somewhere maybe. Just like the Temple of the Forbidden Eye, however, the archaeological excavation site is now offering, just for you, guided tours. However, Sala is nowhere to be found in this attraction. Instead, we have Paco. He has a lot less to say than Sala, but he plays the same role. The rest of the limited story is presented on this fun little card here. Paco is hosting the temple tours. The temple was discovered by Indiana Jones. There might be a Fountain of Youth inside there, maybe somewhere, maybe possibly. The Crystal Skull is the guardian spirit and might get angry, but probably not. And that's it. That's the story. I mean, maybe some of the finer details are lost in translation, but from what I was able to find in my own research, that's a story. This ride has a lot more immersive elements, a lot more detailed Imagineering, but it's also a lot less story-focused than the Temple of the Forbidden Eye, and I'm guessing that's just because George Lucas was less involved. George wrote all of the story for Mara's Temple of the Forbidden Eye, where this ride is just kind of a clone where they had more money to make it look better, but less thought to make it a story. I don't know. I might be completely wrong, but let's go ahead. Story aside, the ride is better in literally every other way than our Temple of the Forbidden Eye. So let's take a quick ride through. Not as detailed as last week's guided ride through, but still, the exterior of the temple is obviously giant and incredible. I want to see this in person so bad. The main entry chamber of the queue is massive, and I'm sure it's quite breathtaking in person. This statue is awesome, but this pool of skeletons below the catwalk is even cooler. Mind you, this queue doesn't need to get you half a mile in a straight line to the showroom, so it can kind of play around in one big space rather than going in a long, narrow, straight line. The rest of the queue is also pretty cool. There's this mirror thing with light shining on it, and then we get on the ride. I think recording is discouraged in the Japanese parks as a whole, so I couldn't really find a full, thorough video of the queue, so I think I'm missing some of the queue rooms, but still, that's the queue. Let's just go ahead and get to the ride. There's no Chamber of Destiny, but this entrance hall is amazing. The theming overall just blows me away. Every time I watch these videos, I want to just go there and see it. Mara is definitely cooler than this skull thing guy here, but everything else about the hallway here is better than Disneyland's version. I also like that there's still a lot of snakes on this version of the ride, but they all have sharper right angles in this Mayan style rather than the flowing curves of the Forbidden Eye snakes in India. The Tunnel of Torment is more or less the exact same, but Indy speaks Japanese. This main chamber, however, is awesome. The blue-green colors, there's this giant skull. It's kind of got like a pirate vibe to it instead of the decrepit Mara that we have. And this crazy swirling green vortex of smoke. They didn't need to put a tornado in there, but you better believe that they did. This skull also shoots cooler lasers than Mara, I have to say. And then the mummy chamber is more or less the exact same. The bug chamber is also the exact same, but the projections actually look a whole lot better. These bugs, they kind of give me the creepy crawlies, the way that they look startled in the headlights, whereas the Forbidden Eye ones just look like projections. The bridge is also epic. I mean, check this thing out. That's It's just wildly cool. The snake temple is a bit cooler. The snake animatronic seems to work better. It's not a cobra, which makes sense because the ride takes place somewhere in Central to South America, which is not a region where cobras are geographically found. And then instead of lava, there's this pool of smoke with lightning rippling through it, which is so awesome. It's so much cooler than our lava pit that just kind of looks okay. The mudslide is pretty much the same, but the Ghost of Mara is not there. Instead, there's another crystal skull on a different pedestal. There's the cool lightning pool and tornado again. And then, the best improvement of the ride, there is no rat log. The worst room doesn't exist. Instead, this statue yells at you in Japanese and then shoots a fireball at you. It's a billion trillion times better than the rat log. Even the dart room looks cooler with these carved faces instead of those painted blacklight skeletons. And then there's the boulder scene and it's pretty much the exact same and the rest of the ride is over. That's the Temple of the Crystal Skull. It's almost weird in a way how it's the same ride as Disneyland's version, but it's also not. It's like just the same enough to be the same if you're not paying attention, but also so different as to be completely different if you are. Anyways, I really like it. I would love to go see it in person someday, hopefully sooner than later. And with that, we have one final attraction to discuss, though I don't want to spend all too much time on it. So we'll fly back over to Disney World in Florida, this time moving on into the Animal Kingdom. Dinosaur opened April 22nd, 1998 as Countdown to Extinction, but it's now just known as Dinosaur. The reason why I bring it up is because Dinosaur has the exact same ride system and the exact same track layout as the Indiana Jones Adventure, both in California and in Tokyo. But instead of an Indiana Jones Temple expedition, Dinosaur takes you on a time machine back to the very end of the age of the dinosaurs. Again, I don't want to talk about it too much, but it's essentially a cheaper version of the Temple of the Forbidden Eye. You can see more of my thoughts on it in this versus I did up here with Temple of the Forbidden Eye going head to head with the Dinosaur ride. If you like dinosaurs, you will love this ride, but ultimately, the Indiana Jones Adventure is much more thematic and impressive as a whole, in my notably less than humble opinion. In other words, I don't intend to make a 4-part video series about Dinosaur in Florida, because I just don't really care about it that much. So with that, we are up to date. That is everything, more or less, that there is to know about Disney Indiana Jones rides. If there was more to say, I don't know what it would be. I've talked so much at this point, but there is one remaining question. That question is, what's next? Will there be any major refurbishments to any of these rides in the future? More than that, will there be a new Indiana Jones ride at any point in the future? There's been persistent rumors for years now that Disney could turn Animal Kingdom's Dinoland into a whole Indiana Jones themed area. Disney could essentially convert the worst part of Animal Kingdom, Dinoland, into Indiana Jones and the Lost Expedition. It would make a lot of sense. They could reskin the dinosaur ride into another Indiana Jones adventure, possibly more similar to the one in Disney Sea, so that all of the new Indiana Jones land could be set in South America, which would make sense if you think about it. Animal Kingdom already has Asia, Africa, it has Pandora, so why not Central or South America with a Indiana Jones theme? Overall, I think it's extremely unlikely that that will ever actually happen, but it does make sense. Movie-based lands are a thing now with Star Wars Land and the world of Avatar. Not to mention, a 5th Indiana Jones movie is currently in production. As we know, the 4th movie was kind of a flop, but if the 5th one does really well, it could give some new life to the Indiana Jones franchise and give Disney reason to expand, to increase Indy's presence in the parks. But that's all I've got. That's the end of the Forbidden Eye series. Thank you so much for watching. Honestly, this series has been one heck of an undertaking. I've never done anything like this before. This is the most work I've ever funneled into a series or any YouTube project at all, but your feedback has been super encouraging. So maybe something like this will happen again down the road. Uploads will slow down just a little bit for now as I kind of get back into the swing of it, but normal Disneylander videos will be resuming soon, though you can expect more history content of some sort in the future. Maybe not another 4-part series, but you know, we'll see. Anyways, thank you so much for watching. Share the series with a friend, get someone else obsessed. And have a great time until I see you again. Not bad for tourists or viewers. Bye.